Well, thanks for joining us for our October Voter Friendly Campus webinar. Really appreciate folks joining us today. We're going to be kind of hopefully doing that last mile here. Just 3 more weeks till a midterm election day. So this is our last VFC webinar that we'll have pre-election. We'll be back with folks after this in November to start talking about doing final reports and kind of thinking about what worked and what didn't and planning ahead on that front. So I appreciate you being here with us for that today, and really excited to have Gideon with us to talk about the Election Protection Coalition. We'll talk some about misinformation, and there we go, as well as also share out some social media content we have, and then also just a quick reminder for folks that Vote Early Day, one of the few remaining civic holidays we have left in this election season, is coming up next week. And I know a lot of folks even have stuff before Friday on the 28th throughout that whole week. So really looking forward to see how all that goes, and can't wait. You know, voting is started in a number of states already. So we're already in election season at this point. So appreciate you all taking some time to be here with us this afternoon to chat about this. And with that, I will turn it over to Gideon to talk to us about the Election Protection Coalition and hotline.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Mike. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Gideon Epstein. I'm a national coordinator with the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. We're a national racial justice civil rights nonprofit based in Washington, D.C. But we convene the Election Protection Coalition, which I'll tell y'all a little bit more about. So if we can go ahead to the next couple of slides, we can go one more and one more. So let's talk about what election protection is. EP, election protection for short, is the nation's largest nonpartisan voter protection program. We've got over 300 local, state, and national organizations a part of the coalition at this point. And in 20, we had literally tens of thousands of volunteers mobilized as nonpartisan hotline volunteers through our 866 Our Vote hotline and partners language access hotlines, through remote opportunities like social media monitoring, and through in-person, on-the-ground volunteer opportunities through our field programs, which include poll monitoring and some legal rapid response. And our coalition's goal is ultimately to ensure that every eligible voter can cast their ballot on election day or during early voting, and of course, have their vote counted. So just to share a bit about the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, where I work, we are a civil rights nonprofit based in DC, and we were founded during the heart of the civil rights era in 1963, when President Kennedy convened a meeting in the White House with a variety of private bar attorneys to protect civil rights in a variety of areas. And our election protection program really takes this mission of mobilizing private bar attorneys very seriously, because attorneys are a significant part of our 866 Our Vote hotline operations, which I'll speak more about. So what does EP do to ensure free and fair elections? I've spoken a little bit about the hotline, but just to go a little bit further, my team at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law coordinates and runs the 866 Our Vote hotline. Those digits are 866-687-8683. And when voters call into the hotline, or partners for that matter, we're able to help them out with simple voting inquiries like, where's my polling place? How do I update my voter registration? Simple questions like that, but also much more complex and interesting issues, like threats of voter intimidation, impediments to voting by mail, voter ID misapplication at polling places. So we'll hear about these kinds of issues prior to election day and on election day itself. And we work with a coalition of partners on the ground to escalate these issues. So through strategies like outreach to local election officials and post-election advocacy, we aim to help every eligible voter cast their ballot. And ultimately what our program stands for is serving as ground advocates for voters on election day. That's why we take our partnership with state-based partners so seriously. We, of course, don't want national groups to be taking over what should be a state-based organization effort in reaching out to local election officials and contacting voters like you all are doing on campuses across the country. So we take this partnership with state partners very seriously. To share a bit more about the coalition, as I said earlier, we're now over 300 organizations strong. Our hotline is live 7 days a week at this point. So if you call from Monday through Friday, you can call from 9 a.m. through 9 p.m. and get connected with a trained hotline volunteer, all of whom are attorneys. But in terms of messaging the hotline, we don't want to let people know that they are attorneys merely because we don't want to create the pretense of an attorney-client relationship, which is certainly not what we're doing with the 866 Our Vote hotline. So the folks answering calls are all attorneys and trained legal professionals. But with that said, we usually just say that they're trained nonpartisan election protection volunteers. Oh, and I think we got disconnected real quick. Thanks. So just to tell a bit more about our partner groups, we work with nonprofit organizations, of course, Greek organizations on campus, student governance groups, faculty, a variety of stakeholders. And we've recently started working with clergy, which I think is really exciting in a variety of states. And just to mention a bit more beyond, kind of the voter education outreach efforts that we engage in through the 866 Our Vote hotline, a lot of what we do is collect data that will support pro-voting access legislation after Election Day. So if we hear about widespread issues of misapplication of the voter ID law, for example, in a given state, partners on the ground might choose to use the information gathered during early voting and on Election Day to advocate for greater access to the ballot box in terms of the voter ID law. So this is just a handful of our partners to show you some of the groups that are involved, including Campus Vote Project and SLSV. We really take our partnership with the youth voting community very seriously, and we're really passionate about engaging youth voters and making sure that youth voting rights is in the center of this conversation about ensuring voting rights for all. And just one more. So I want to talk about some of the issues we've heard about really since the pandemic, which has shifted the entire landscape of this election protection work. So a lot of what we've been seeing this cycle because of the pandemic really has to do with temporary changes that were made in 2020 that are now reverting back to how they were this cycle. So that might include a no excuse absentee voting law that was temporarily in place during the pandemic, but is now being reverted in many different states, frankly. So we're hearing a lot of confusion from voters who think that they can vote the exact same way they did in 2020 based on temporary voting measures, but really cannot at this point. We've also heard about a lot of consolidated and closed polling places across the country. So with the shortage of poll workers across the country, we're seeing that polling places need to be consolidated and closed, which is having a chilling effect on voting and is confusing a lot of voters. So those are just a couple of the issues that we're hearing about. I also hear a lot about student-specific voting issues, like folks needing to vote outside of the area that they're currently residing in for school, or issues around voter ID and student ID being accepted at polling places. So those are kind of a snapshot of the kind of issues we hear about on a regular basis. So let's talk about how y'all can get involved. To talk about our grassroots efforts, in 2020, we had over 40,000 volunteers in about 35 states. We've actually added a few more programs this cycle as folks are continuing to realize how important it is to have nonpartisan voter protection efforts across the country. So to share a bit more about our grassroots poll monitoring on the next slide, if you go to protectthevote.net, you can sign up to be a nonpartisan poll monitor in all 50 states. But with that said, we don't have poll monitoring programs in quite every state, but the map we just looked at on the previous slide does show you where we have programs. But like I said, these are rapidly popping up across the country. So even in a state where there might not be a program at this point, I would guess that there will be in the coming years, especially with the help of organizers on the ground. But just to share a bit more about what grassroots volunteers do, they actually interface with voters outside of polling places. They identify issues at polling places around accessibility, which are incredibly important. And they get a bit of an introduction to state election law so that they can help voters outside polling places ultimately. So that's a bit about grassroots poll monitor opportunities. We also partner with Common Cause on social media monitoring opportunities. In contrast to the nonpartisan poll monitoring volunteer opportunities, social media monitoring is all remote, so it can be done from the comfort of your own home. And basically, what Common Cause will train you to do is monitor a variety of social media platforms for mis and disinformation. So this is a great opportunity, especially for students who might not be able to, travel a long distance to get to a polling place. But this is a great activation, really prior to and on election day as well. Lastly, but certainly not least, I wanted to talk about the hotlines. I think that's the main reason, I wanted to join this call today, really to share the 866 Our Vote hotline number and the suite of language access hotlines that are available to voters across the country in Spanish, 7 or 8 different Asian languages, and in Arabic. So the partners who run those hotlines, all nonpartisan organizations, are listed here. But these are all great resources to include on nonpartisan literature that y'all are passing out around campus, or if there's any kind of messaging or literature like shared on computer screens or other graphic opportunities across campus. I've linked our social media toolkit on the next slide, so we can jump to there. So this social media toolkit right here, hopefully it can be dropped in the chat. If not, I can do it after I'm done speaking. But it's got a bunch of great evergreen graphics that share a variety of ways that the hotline can be used. So helping folks make a plan to vote, reminding folks to vote early, letting them know that voter intimidation is illegal and the hotline is a resource to report that intimidation. So our hotline volunteers are amazing, and we are frankly very well staffed at this point to answer hundreds of thousands of calls. I think the prior slide shared that we got over 240,000 calls from voters in 2020, and the call volume is pretty staggering this cycle as well. As voters are excited about the upcoming elections and have a bunch of questions. So please help us get the word out there. Obviously, the social media toolkit is included for social media purposes, but the messaging and the graphics can be reposted for email communication or any other form of communication that you might be engaged in to reach out to student voters on your campus. And with that, just wanted to reiterate the next steps here. So please help us to recruit nonpartisan poll monitors. I did a lot of youth organizing on campus when I was a college student a few years ago. And my observation was basically that there's a ton of work that goes on to engage voters prior to election day to make sure that they're registered and make sure that they have a plan to vote. But then sometimes on election day, maybe folks don't have a lot of great opportunities for volunteers since that registration and engagement work is at least partially wrapped up prior to election day. So this nonpartisan poll monitoring and social media monitoring opportunity is great for folks who have already been engaged with youth civic engagement efforts, but want to go the extra mile. But most of all, wanted to be here to remind y'all about the 866 Our Vote hotline. When you can, please include the digits 866-687-8683, just so that there isn't any confusion about how to reach us. Voters can call or text the hotline anytime between now and election day. So please help us get the word out. And thank you so much for having me today. I'll definitely be able to stick around for the next few minutes to take some questions.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gideon. I really appreciate you jumping on and sharing all that with us today. Does anyone have questions about the Election Protection Coalition or how the hotlines operate?
Hey, Gideon, it's Ken Gazzett from Georgia Southern University. And you had mentioned about social media monitoring, and specifically as it relates to misinformation or disinformation. I certainly have learned along the way, depending on who you're talking to or listening or watching, certainly can be subjective on what's misinformation or disinformation. What's the best way to objectively approach something like that, with recognizing you could be seeing something that you really don't know anything about, but you want to be able to help figure that out. So with all tons of resources out there to figure out that have angles on certain pieces of information, what do you suggest to help wade through what's being posted?
Yeah, well, I would give you a 2-minute answer, but I know that we have got a great 15 or 20-minute presentation right after me from Raylan, so I don't want to steal her thunder. But I'll just share 2 top lines real quick. I know that Common Cause runs reportdisinfo.org. So if you ever see misinformation or disinformation online, that's the best place to report. And the other top line, I would say that I know Raylan's going to say this, so I'm sorry that I'm stealing your thunder a little bit. But we always say, we don't want to amplify anything that might be misinformation or disinformation, even if that includes responding to the information on social media. So the last thing you want to do is say, look, everyone, this is a bunch of misinformation right here. So I know that Raylan's about to go into that more in depth, but those are just a couple of thoughts on what we can do to counter mis and disinformation.
Yeah, I will say from some polling we did, even just last month, and what we've heard for a very long time and seen in a lot of other surveys too, is that, campus administrators, faculty members are really a trusted source, as well as kind of family and peers. So really trying to, yeah, like Gideon was saying, is like focus on getting accurate information out there, even in those spaces, knowing especially that a lot of young people are on social media. Trying to make sure that there are sources that when they see it come from those folks, they feel like they can trust it, know that it's accurate, and make sure that that's what we're sharing. I think is a key goal of ours, to make sure that that is also in the space, and that can be what folks are hopefully seeing and getting from the people that they trust on that front. I will say too, like the pace of the change of election laws just in the last few years has really gone through the roof too. So sometimes people, I think, aren't even always doing it intentionally. They just might be out of date because I've been at this for a little while now, and just like the pace of change across the country and by state has just like, it's never been this rapid, just as it has been in the last couple of years since the pandemic. So any other questions, comments? Awesome. Well, yeah, I dropped a couple of links as Gideon was talking, to the overall 866 Our Vote website, directly to the link for signing up if you want to get engaged, as well as to the social media toolkit, so we can try and make sure that we're getting that accurate information out there. I will maybe just ask one more quick one, Gideon. I think this was kind of implied in what you were saying, but the hotlines are live now. Like folks are calling and having their questions answered even now and leading up through Election Day.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry if that was not totally clear. We are currently taking live calls. Our current hours throughout the week are 9 a.m. through 9 p.m. And then on the weekends, we also have live hours from 10 a.m. through 7 p.m. So you can call 7 days a week right now. We're helping usually a few hundred voters out a day during this early voting period. And as more states start early voting, that call volume will increase. And then on election day is when it gets really crazy. We'll see, literally tens of thousands of calls, which takes a whole level of, whole new level of operations to manage that. But this is when the fun starts, to be sure. Give us a call, 866-687-8683.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Good luck. Hang in there these next couple of weeks. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Thank you all.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I think Gideon already previewed this, but we're really excited to also be joined by Raylan today from Common Cause to talk some more specifically about mis and disinformation. I think there's Gideon's information if you want to reach out or follow up to him with any questions. His email's in there. And you can also click the links we dropped in the chat already as well, and we'll send these out with the recording later this week. Okay, but yeah, over to you, Raylan. I think I made you a co-host, so if you want to take over doing screen share, I can.
Perfect. Thank you so much. But thank you for the lovely little drum roll. But as was mentioned, I'm Raylan Roberson, she, her. I am the field coordinator of stopping cyber suppression with Common Cause, and we actually are primarily focused on social media monitoring right now. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about. Definitely talking about that, recognizing mis and disinformation as well, because I saw we had a couple of questions about that. So hopefully what I say can kind of clear some of that up. But thing number one, I do want to just talk quickly about what's going on out there. What are we actually seeing online when it comes to online mis and disinformation around the elections? So we're watching out for some key disinformation trends right now. So the ballot mules narrative, so that comes from the 2000 Mules documentary by Dinesh D'Souza. If you have not seen it, don't watch it. It is not a good time. But yeah, basically they're spinning out of that this conspiracy theory that there's either election workers or people getting paid to go and stuff ballot boxes or steal ballots. And so right now we're seeing still a lot of talk about that documentary, even though it's released quite a bit ago. And there's talks to organize like Dropbox watches. So they're actually gonna like sit their lawn chairs outside of drop boxes and watch them and see what people are doing and how they're voting there and even question them about it. So that's something that we're definitely seeing start like online, but is translating into like real world in real life mobilization. So that's basically what we're doing as social media monitors, is watching out for that chatter online and seeing how that translates into action at the polls. Or another thing we're seeing online a lot of the times is this voting machine disinformation. So just casting doubt on security and integrity of voting machines. So they're stealing your vote, they're weighted, they're rigged, things like that. That's what we're seeing people say online when it comes to trying to spread distrust in our elections. And we're actually seeing people organize online, trying to get people to like only hand count ballots or get rid of machines altogether, trying to make them unconstitutional, they're claiming, so they're trying to make them illegal to use. So we're seeing what kind of things are coming into our election offices surrounding that conversation. And also just seeing what people are believing online and what they're like engaging with. Are they fact checking this? Are they asking questions? And so these seem to be the things that they're not asking a ton of questions about and seem to be falling into a misinformation trap. Also, we're seeing people talking about vote by mail, so casting doubt on the security and integrity of absentee or mail-in ballots. So saying that you shouldn't even be voting in any other way, shape, or form instead, except for in-person voting, because that's the only one we can really trust, right? They're stealing our ballots, they're rigging the mail-in, but that is not the case, but that is a spiral of disinformation that we're seeing out there, as well as just straight up voter intimidation tactics. So we're seeing people organize online around like all of these trends that I mentioned here and actually start doing door-to-door canvassing, which is a little bit worrying. So they're actually showing up at voters' doors, asking like, were you able to vote? This, that, and the other. And so that person's just getting this like stranger at their door, presenting themselves as an election worker. However, they're not actually authorized to be asking those questions, and they feel like they've done something wrong with voting. So these are the things that we're looking out for online. And I'm just going to breeze through a few examples. I always present it like this, like it's like something like horrible nudity, or like I try to censor it as much as possible, just because I don't want to accidentally be like giving anyone who wants to spread disinformation a playbook on how to do it. So I'm going to go through these very quickly. But so we have people saying that they're finding proof that their things are being like covered up. So this one's saying that this has been blown up. They're destroying evidence. We have this one that is like recruiting people to watch their Dropbox because they're saying that there's Dropbox bandits out there. And then also here's someone saying like only vote in person on election day. They're going to like rig your vote. They're going to make it harder to vote, things like that. And then we also have people saying that there's just straight up voter fraud going on like all across the country. This is actually something that was debunked back in 2018 when it happened, but we're just still seeing these narratives repeat and repeat online, and they're actually starting to sway new people to believe that our elections are stolen or rigged. But overall, with our Stopping Cyber Suppression program, we have two main goals when it comes to social media monitoring, and that's voter support and then fighting voter suppression. So on the voter support side of things, that's that proactive voter education. So that just means like to not fall for lies, you got to know the truth. So we're giving them the information about their voting processes and telling them about the disinformation that's out there so they're less likely to fall for it. And also that's connecting them to the 866 Our Vote hotline that Gideon was talking about earlier, and then answering questions when they ask them online. We also have fighting voter suppression. So that's flagging that online mis and disinformation so that we can try to get those things removed. So removed from the platform, or maybe we can get them fact checked so it's actually suppressed by the algorithm and it's not going to spread as much. We also have that counter speech content. So if they see something and they're like, oh, I don't think that's quite true, but I can't put my finger on it, we provide that last missing puzzle piece like, oh, did you know they got all this money from this organization? And maybe that's why they're spreading these lies, because they know it'll make them money. So we're trying to give that counter speech content to help people fight back against these online narratives once they see it and once they recognize it. Also, we're monitoring bad actors. So just any frequent election deniers and then any influential public figures who have the potential to say something about the election that a lot of people will actually believe. So that's the main gist of what we're doing. So voter support, then fighting voter suppression. And a really key part of this, as was mentioned by Ken, is just knowing what to recognize. So identify that mis and disinformation. How do you actually know if it's something that is intentionally misinformative or if it's accidentally? Or how do we know that this is something that is true or not actually something that is a piece of disinformation that we should take as an election lie? So there's two different categories. And the reason I talk about the two different categories, even though there's like 5, is because we actually only want to take action on these two. So that's misinformation and disinformation. We also have this image sometimes of like just a bad guy in the 90s hacker trench coat, like in the corner of his dark room on the computer spreading lies because he's evil. That is totally not the case all the time. It's usually someone who's well-meaning like you or me, who's accidentally just spreading lies about the election just because we don't have all the facts, right? And what I've explained there is misinformation. So that's when someone's accidentally sharing inaccurate information. So that confusing typo, another state's guidelines, and they meant to put their own state's guidelines. It can be outdated information. What used to be true is just not true anymore. Also just accidentally putting the wrong polling hours. So, hey friends, make sure you go vote by 9, but the polls close at 8. So if anyone were to listen to you, they missed out on an hour of voting that they thought they had. And also and this is the most common one, is sharing disinformation in an attempt to debunk it. So this happens all the time. We see something online, it looks completely fake and outrageous. And we're like, they know this is not true. I'm going to send a reply about why this is not true. I'm going to explain to people why they should not believe in this. However, you've accidentally amplified the disinformation content, because your mom or your sister, your friend, they were never going to see that disinformation had you not put it on their social media feed by replying to it, right? So this is the most common form of it. So now that you know that, you're not going to do it. And that's what we teach all of our monitors, is how to be very careful about the content that they might be spreading to their online social spaces. But that's accidental. I'm going to talk about intentional now. So disinformation is very intentional, and it's the use of false election information to try to affect the participation of voters in an election cycle. And this is to be harmful. So it targets a group, a community, an organization, or a country. And so what this can look like is the wrong election date for a specific group of people. And this is usually done in non-English languages, because a lot of our voting information sometimes is not easily as distributed in these other languages. So the disinformation can really take root in those communities. So they do this to try to specifically get them to miss deadlines to register or deadlines to vote. So very malicious, very xenophobic, but again, very intentional. And also there's manipulated audio or visual content. So this just like putting a picture or a video out there and claiming that it's proof that our election was stolen. And a lot of the time, this will actually get people to move to action. This is what kind of drives people to show up and sit outside of a drop box. They truly believe that they've seen with their own eyes that our election was stolen, right? So that is, again, very intentional and very malicious. And then there's the conspiracy theories or rumors that harm that voter confidence and make them think, well, maybe if there is something up with our elections, maybe I might sit this one out. That's the overall goal of what that disinformation is trying to do. So again, intentional, harmful. And then you have plain old just voter intimidation that I was talking about. So showing up when people are trying to vote or after they voted, or even before they voted, and trying to convince them that maybe they're doing something wrong, or maybe they do not have the right to vote. But when it comes to actually addressing disinformation, this is what I drill in the heads of everyone I come across at this point, is that we do not want to amplify it. So do not amplify disinformation content. So that means not commenting on it, not reacting to it, not trying to share it and debunk it, because all of these things are just amplifying it and spreading it and boosting the algorithm to put it on other people's feeds. What we do want to do instead is that report disinfo.org. So you can report any disinformation that you see online to us, and we take care of it. We try to get it removed, or we make some inoculation content about it. So that is the hotline you want to go to. I mean, not the hotline, but the source. And then avoid cross-pollination. So if you see something outrageous on Facebook, do not take a screenshot of it and put it on Twitter, because you're just totally taking an audience that would have never seen that disinformation and then exposing them to it. So avoiding cross-pollination is another very important thing to do. And also share that pro-democracy content. So we know that we want to try to suppress disinformation, right? But we also still need to solve the problem of voters not feeling like they have the correct information to actually go vote and feeling less confident in doing so. So that's just sharing that pro-democracy content with maybe facts about voting, how to actually access your voting location, and making voting seem like the most fun thing to do ever, instead of something that's just going to ultimately seal your vote, which is a very specific thing that the right is trying to do right now. But putting that pro-democracy content far and wide is really what's going to do a lot to combat some of this election disinformation. Something got put in the chat. Awesome, just that report disinfo. But I'm going to talk a little bit about why the amplification works like that, just because I know some folks go like, oh, but like, how do I really avoid spreading this? Or like, oh, I really can't reply to anything. So like, this is what's going on there. So social media platforms are engineered to give us content that people are most likely to engage with. So all that means is that if Facebook really thinks that a lot of people are talking about something, that you might also want to talk about it as well. So they're going to try to give it to you on your feed. And also platforms don't differentiate between negative and positive interactions. So Facebook does not know the difference between like a happy comment and an angry comment. All Facebook knows is that, hey, people are talking about this, we should probably spread this around. And also it optimizes for user engagement. So that just means that things that generate a lot of engagement is what's going to do well online. And we know that election lies does very well online. So it has an edge over all this content when it comes to what's spreading and what's popular and what's trending. And also we have our echo chambers. So we all exist in an online echo chamber somewhere. And that is because of, again, the social media algorithms. So they actually leverage large scale data collection, like our browsing activity, our purchasing history, our location data, all sorts of fun things, right? And so everyone who has similar data sees similar things. So that means you're more likely to fall into confirmation bias, which is routinely seeing misinformation from trusted messengers, such as your friends and your family members, that aligns with your worldview and then cements what the idea that you're seeing something that is true because it's coming from these trusted people in your life. So this is what we're up against, right? So this is what we're definitely working really hard to fight against. And these algorithms have not made it easy, but I think we have cracked the code. So here is what we tell our monitors to do. So when it comes to online misinformation, so if someone's just accidentally put the wrong information about our election, like the accidental polling location, or maybe they've accidentally said to register on the wrong date, they're able to just go ahead and correct that. So they can just correct the information and then ask them, hey, please delete this so that people don't get confused later on. And so we've seen that that's actually been very effective so far online. And then of course, with disinformation, we're not amplifying it. We tell them just report it. So we're not giving it any more steam. But then also on the other hand, we're providing that voter assistance. So people see allies online that they can look to know that they have people who want them to vote, and they will give them the correct access to those materials online. So that's the correct hotline information, and then also state-specific guidance where we have it. And then they fill out an incident report form just so that we know what people are having trouble with. So maybe we can make some more proactive content about it in the future. And then remember, I mentioned that pro-democracy content earlier. This is about to get so obnoxious, I apologize, but that's the point of it, is because what we noticed is if we just put a FAQ online, it looks like a lawyer or somebody wrote it. We don't really want to read that, right? So it doesn't really get a lot of likes, shares, or retweets. So we put things like GIFs that are very flashy, very bright, high share value, so that we can actually get this seen far and wide. So again, that inoculation content that defends voters against disinformation before it's seen, as well as counter speech content that fights back against disinformation that has already been seen. So of course, we have one that's warning about online misinformation, so people actually are knowing now to be on the lookout for it. And then we have a little example here for Pennsylvania saying like, hey, don't forget your voter ID, make sure you have this, just so it's a little less likely that someone will go to the polls and forget their ID. Because I saw that really cute GIF about it on Twitter earlier, and they remembered to grab their ID because of it, right? And then, of course, we have another one to, again, explain that disinformation is on purpose and it's targeted and it's malicious and that people should be on the lookout for it and therefore should fact check everything that they look at and make sure that it's backed by a reliable source. But in case you're wondering, this is where we're monitoring. So we're on Reddit, Instagram, Nextdoor, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. We also have some friends monitoring in their WhatsApp feeds and Telegram. So we're trying to get as big of an eye as possible on social media as we approach these early vote and these midterms. So if you know anyone who would be interested in doing this, definitely send them our way to become a monitor. So I give an hour-long training, Ask Ariel. I think it's pretty obnoxious and fun. We play a little mini game in there and everything. But yeah, it's just a 1-hour training about how to recognize mis and disinformation and how to search for it online and report it to us, as well as report disinfo, of course. So if you're not going to join us to be a monitor, no worries at all. You can still report disinformation to us at that reportdisinfo.org. And also just share that pro-democracy content. So this is something called freedomtovote.art. I'm just going to click it open on my screen right fast. So it just is like this really good library of that pro-democracy content. And we're going to have it updated a little bit more frequently starting, I think, next week with some more pressing inoculation content that we need matching the disinformation that we're seeing. But this is definitely a very good place to go to get that made by us inoculation content specifically for disinformation online. But that is the end of my spiel. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Any more questions about this? That was really great. I appreciate that. That was a lot of helpful information. Oh, well, yeah, I think in hopefully a good segue from that is Kola from our team is actually going to talk a little bit about some other pre-made content that we have as well, including a lot of state-specific stuff for all of you in the states where CVP has staff that we have up on our site now. I think, do I have the slides back up for you, Kola? Can you see them?
Yes, I see them.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Raylan, for jumping on with us. We really appreciate all you're doing. I can only assume what it's like to also have to work and look at a lot of election lines every day and try and report them and address them in the best way possible. I know how hard I find it just to see the spillover, trying to hang out in pro-democracy spaces that I get every day. So thanks for being willing to dig in on that and all the great work that you and all the volunteers are doing.
Thank you.
All right. Well, yep. Now I'm going to turn it over to Kola to talk some about some other kind of positive, accurate election information that we can get out to folks in these last 3 weeks.
Thanks, Mike. So our Campus Vote Project Communications team has put together a student voter advocate toolkit. This contains, if you go to the next slide, several different categories of content, and we'll continuously be adding content as we develop more. But these are deadlines by date and states. These are covering our core states. We have voter registration content, early vote content, vote by mail content, general GOTV content, poll worker recruitment, as well as election protection media. We do link out to the election protections greater toolkit as well here. So this is a great source to get additional content that is professionally created, that is accurate and up to date, along with some messaging guidance and hashtags, things like that that you can use as well. So you can check this out. Mike, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, so you can go ahead and check this out. I'm going to drop the link in the chat. We also have it here in the QR code on the next slide. and folks can pull it up however is easiest for them. Mike, could you go to the next slide? And like I said, we will just continuously be adding here as we get more content, but there's already a lot of good stuff there. And as we find other trusted partners, resources, we'll link out to them as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Cola. And then did want to just flag for folks another quick reminder as we're discussed about some today already. Early voting is already underway or about to start in a number of states. We have our next civic holiday coming up on Friday, October 28th, but I know our team will be out at a lot of events starting next week. And I think even this Friday, as folks start to do things around voting early in a number of different jurisdictions. So this is our kind of third civic holiday as we kind of move through that calendar for the semester. So we already had National Voter Registration Day, Voter Education Week, and now we're into election season and then voting has started. So have Vote Early Day coming up. And then there is another one, Election Hero Day. I'm just trying to do some work right before Election Day to try and build some buzz and remind folks to, again, like we were talking about, do some of this kind of proactive work too with Election Hero Day to remind people that it is generally like members of their own community and other local folks who actually are the ones who serve as election officials, who serve as poll workers on Election Day, who are the key part of making our election infrastructure actually work so that we can have smooth elections. So we'll have some content that we'll share out with folks too as we move towards Election Hero Day around kind of helping remind folks of that and kind of lift up some of these folks who do a very large amount of work to make sure that people can have their voices heard in their individual communities. So, but that is everything we had for today. I know it's a busy time of year, so we appreciate everybody hopping on with us today for a bit to kind of talk and share some of this kind of hopefully helpful resources in this final stretch here.